On Christmas night, my mom asked, "When are you going to start your own family?" I looked up and said, "Weren't you supposed to be mine?" Dad added, "Guys your age build relationships and careers. You're still sleeping in your childhood bed." I raised my cocoa to my future family, where I'll sleep wherever I want, left the keys on the table. And then I did something that plunged their Christmas into silence. Every Christmas, I return to my parents' house like clockwork. Not because I want to, because it's expected. I'm 29, single, no kids. I rent a modest one-bedroom above a bakery in a town nobody's heard of, and I work maintenance for the school district. It's honest work. Fixing busted heaters, patching drywall, clearing snow at dawn. But to my family, it's a punchline waiting to happen. They don't say it out loud. Not directly, but they say it in the silences, in the raised eyebrows, in the polite chuckles when someone asks what I plan to do with my life. My mom, Susan, runs a local real estate office and treats every dinner like a networking event. My dad, Tom, is a retired contractor who thinks real men should have their own business by 25 and a mortgage by 30. And my brother Chris? He's their trophy case. Married at 24, 2 kids by 27, brand new house. A job with some startup that lets him work remote and consult, whatever that means. He says things like, equity stake and crypto window while I bring up the cost of snow tires. But I still show up. With gifts, with pie, with fake smiles. This year I thought it might go differently. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd helped fix the bathroom after the flood, or because I finally paid off my car. Maybe because I wanted it to go differently. I hoped for warmth, for something like grace. Instead, I got ambushed, and it was Mom who lit the match. It happened right after dessert. I was cutting a second slice of pie when she looked at me across the table and said, loud enough for the kids to stop giggling, "So, when are you going to start your own family?" I froze, fork in midair. Chris's wife smiled politely. My dad let out a small grunt. Not a laugh, just enough to punctuate the question. Before I could answer, Dad added, "Guys your age are out building something. The future. You're still sleeping in your childhood bed." My fingers clenched the fork. I could feel my jaw lock. They always do this. Always find a way to shrink me down to something digestible, unimpressive, safe to mock. So I raised my cocoa with a smile. To my future family, where I'll sleep wherever I want. And I stood up. I pulled the key from my pocket, the one I've carried since I left for trade school, and placed it on the table. Gently. Final. Silence. Mom blinked. Dad looked away. Chris cleared his throat. Nobody said a word. Then I did something that ruined their perfect little Christmas. And I don't regret a second of it. I walked into the hallway, grabbed my coat, and opened the front door. Then I turned around, stepped back just far enough for them to hear me, and said, "By the way, don't touch the savings account." I moved the money. My mom's face went pale, like bone-white pale. "What money?" she asked too fast. I tilted my head. "The one you helped me open when I got my first job at 19. The one that was supposed to be for a down payment someday." She stood up, clutching her wine glass. We were helping you manage it. You were young. That money's still there." "Yeah, it was," I said, "until last week, when I checked the activity log and saw 3 separate withdrawals last year labeled family expenses. Funny, I don't remember authorizing that." Dad scoffed. "Are you seriously bringing this up on Christmas?" "No," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "I brought it up the moment I realized you weren't just careless. You were stealing." Chris muttered something under his breath, but I was already outside, snow crunching under my boots. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The silence I left behind did all the work. I got in my car, sat for a moment with the engine running, and let the heater hum. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, from the kind of fury that doesn't make you yell, the kind that sits in your chest like an iron weight. Cold, final, unmovable. That savings account was the only thing I had from my early 20s that I hadn't already sacrificed to rent or loans or car repairs. I thought it was safe. I thought, even if they judged me, they wouldn't steal from me. I was wrong. I stayed in that driveway 5 full minutes. Nobody came after me. Nobody called. And that's when I realized they didn't think they did anything wrong. They never do. The next morning, I drove straight to the bank. I had barely slept, just kept replaying everything in my head, the looks on their faces, the way Mom said, "That money's still there," like it belonged to her, like I was a child asking to borrow something they had earned. When I opened the account at 19, Mom insisted on being a joint holder. "Just in case," she said. I was working full-time at the time, delivery trucks, long shifts, backbreaking work. Every paycheck I'd put a little aside. They said it was smart, that they were proud of me. Turns out what they really meant was, thanks for the rainy day fund. The bank manager, Lisa, remembered me. She pulled the statements and flagged the 3 withdrawals right away. $2,400 labeled emergency HVAC replacement. $3,100 for school enrollment deposit. $5,000 transferred directly into Tom and Susan Holdings LLC, a consulting company my parents had set up 3 years ago for tax purposes. I stared at the screen in disbelief. That last transfer was dated 1 week after I'd mentioned on a phone call I was thinking of moving out and starting fresh in another city. They must have panicked. Or maybe they just didn't care. They said it was for me, I told Lisa quietly. She gave me a sad smile. "Honey, people lie about money all the time, especially to the ones they think won't fight back." I transferred the remaining balance, just under $11,000, into a new, secure account. My name only. Then I signed the paperwork to remove them as joint holders. Felt anticlimactic, like taking the lock off a door after the burglars already cleaned the place out. But it was something, and I wasn't done yet. I knew I couldn't let this sit, couldn't let them rewrite the story again. So I started collecting everything. Screenshots, emails, even text messages where Mom mentioned using part of your savings for the good of the family. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but for the first time in years, I had one thing they never expected: leverage. Took 3 days for anyone to reach out. 3 days of silence, no calls, no texts, nothing. Not even a passive-aggressive group message about the holiday being ruined. And then, like clockwork, I got a message from Chris. "Hey, Mom's been crying. Can you just come talk? It's not as bad as you're making it." I didn't respond. 2 hours later, Mom called. I let it ring out. Then came the voicemail. "Sweetheart, we only ever tried to help you. That money went to family emergencies. You think your niece's tuition wasn't important? Or the furnace in the middle of winter? Don't punish us for being parents." I saved the voicemail, not because I wanted to hear it again, but because I knew I might need it. Then Dad texted. No pleasantries. Just, "Grow up." And finally, the real kicker. Chris again the next morning. "You told the bank? Seriously? You're making a huge mistake. That money was never just yours. We all sacrificed for you to have it. Don't rewrite history just because you're angry." That was when something clicked. They weren't just lying. They were rewriting everything, trying to turn my savings into some kind of shared family fund they had earned the right to dip into. Never mind that I'd worked 2 jobs that year, barely slept, skipped vacations. Never mind that I wore secondhand shoes while they remodeled the kitchen. To them, my labor was always optional, something they could reframe as contribution to the household. I pulled out a file folder, the one I'd kept in the back of my closet with old bank receipts, paycheck stubs, even a photo of me holding my first job contract from age 19. I started organizing everything by date, by transaction, by context. And as I did, the bitterness turned into something sharper, cleaner, resolve. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make damn sure they couldn't twist this anymore. That Saturday I agreed to meet, not because I wanted to make peace, but because I wanted to watch them lie to my face and know, finally, that I wasn't imagining any of it. Chris offered to host at his house, said it would be neutral ground. Neutral, despite the framed family photos on every wall where I was always just slightly off to the side, half-cropped or turned away. When I arrived, they were all already seated: Mom, Dad, Chris, and Lauren. The kids were upstairs. I sat across from them and placed the folder on the table. Thick, organized, labeled. I came prepared, I said. Mom started first. Sweetheart, this isn't court. It might be, I replied, not smiling. Dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So what, you're suing us now? Is that how low this family's sunk? No, I said. I just want to be clear about what happened, because I'm tired of being gaslit every time I bring up something real. Chris jumped in, voice rehearsed. We always supported you, okay? That money, it was never some personal vault. You lived rent-free for years. Mom and Dad paid for your food, your clothes, your... I held up a page. 2015, $600 deposited. 2016, $3,400 deposited. 2017, $5,800. All my deposits. None from you. I paid for my own insurance and gas starting at 20. I even bought the groceries the last 2 Christmases. Lauren shifted uncomfortably, but stayed quiet. Mom's voice cracked. We thought we could use some of it for the house, for our family. You never said you needed it. Because I didn't think I had to, I said. I thought you were keeping it safe, like you promised. Chris laughed, sharp and bitter. You act like you're the only one who struggles. You have no idea what it costs to raise a family. I met his eyes. Exactly. That's why I didn't start one in a house full of people who never respected mine. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was embarrassed, because for the first time, they realized I wasn't looking for approval. I was holding up a mirror. Nobody spoke for a while after that. You could feel it, the balance tipping. Mom looked like she might cry, but not out of guilt. Out of fear. Fear that whatever hold they thought they had over me was gone. You're not being fair, she whispered finally. We didn't steal. We used it for the family. Your family. No, I said, my voice steady. Your family. You've never treated me like part of it unless I was convenient. Dad's mouth twitched like he was about to explode, but I kept going. You used my savings without asking. That's theft. I could press charges, but I won't. Not yet. Lauren turned toward me then, gently. What do you want from them? The question was sincere, and I appreciated it more than I expected. I want the truth acknowledged, I said. I want Mom and Dad to admit what they did. No excuses. No, you were a child crap. No, we sacrificed so much. Just honesty. Chris shook his head. And if they don't? I looked down at the folder. Then I go to the lawyer who already reviewed all this, and I tell him to file. Mom gasped. You spoke to a lawyer? Yes, I said, after I pulled the last of the money out of the account. After I realized this wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. You take, then justify. And I'm done being your excuse. Dad stood. You ungrateful little. I stood too. Calm. Taller than him now. Stronger in a way that had nothing to do with height. You don't get to raise your voice anymore, I said quietly. You lost that right when you raised your hand to my future. That was the first time he backed down. Just sat. Jaw tight. Silent. And I knew I had them. Not because they feared me, but because they finally understood I wasn't their child anymore. I was a grown man, and I wasn't playing by their rules. They didn't apologize that night. Not really. There were a few limp phrases like, we didn't know you felt this way, and things were complicated. But nothing close to accountability. I didn't push. I didn't need it anymore. I'd stopped expecting them to say the right thing. What I needed was for them to stop lying, to themselves, to me, to the rest of the family. So before I left, I made it simple. I'm not asking you to give anything back, I said. But if you ever tell someone I was ungrateful, that I abandoned this family, or that I didn't contribute, I will send them a copy of this entire file. Chris rolled his eyes, but he didn't say a word. Mom reached for me. I didn't move. You can call me when you're ready to be honest, I added, then looked directly at Dad. And if I find out there were more accounts, more transfers, or any games with my name on them? You won't, he said quickly. I nodded. Good. Then I walked out. That night, I drove past my old high school, the gas station where I used to work nights, and finally pulled into my apartment lot just past midnight. The air was freezing, but I stood there for a second before going in, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one who needed to explain himself. I wasn't running anymore. I was done asking for room at their table. Now I was building my own. 2 days later, I got a text from my Aunt Marla. Heard about the Christmas drama. Everything okay? Which meant, of course, Mom had already started her version of the story. I didn't respond right away. I needed to think not about whether to defend myself, but how much truth to give. Then another message came in, this time from my cousin Amanda. Your mom's telling people you threatened them with lawyers over rent money. What's going on? There it was. The rewrite. Fast and predictable. Suddenly I was the unstable one. The bitter son who blew up Christmas over a misunderstanding. The one who forgot all they'd done for him and stormed out like a child. It made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was textbook. They couldn't control me anymore, so they'd try to control the narrative. But what they didn't realize is, I was done playing quiet. I sent Amanda a few screenshots, just the essentials. Transaction history, the joint account, the $5,000 to their consulting company. No commentary, just facts. Within 10 minutes she replied, Holy crap, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Then Marla texted again. I wish they'd just told us the truth. You didn't deserve that. I didn't need validation, but I won't lie, it helped. Because for years, my family had relied on one thing to keep me small, silence. And I was finally, gloriously, breaking it. The next week, the calls began. Not from Mom or Dad. They'd gone quiet again, probably hoping the storm would pass. But from others. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Uncle Rob. My godmother Eileen. Even Pastor Jennings from the old church. All of them with the same tone. Concerned, confused, curious. Your mom's just really upset, Eileen said gently. She says you accused them of stealing. Surely it's just a misunderstanding? No, I said. It's not. I kept it simple with each call. No emotion, no gossip, no character assassination. Just the numbers, the facts, what was taken, when, and how. Every time the reaction was the same, a pause, then either a sigh or an apology. And I realized something. My parents had built their reputation on this image of perfect sacrifice, hardworking, generous, salt-of-the-earth people. But they never expected that their son might someday hold receipts. The more people I calmly, quietly told, the more cracks appeared in the perfect picture they painted every holiday. Some believed me right away. Others were hesitant, not because they thought I was lying, but because the truth was inconvenient. It's easier, I guess, to believe the child went rogue than to face the idea that the parents were never saints to begin with. But I wasn't telling my story for revenge. I was telling it so no one else could rewrite it again. So no one could say, well, maybe he misunderstood, or they meant well, or it wasn't that bad. It was that bad. And I wasn't going to let that get lost in whispers and rewrites. Not anymore. It was a rainy Thursday when she showed up at my door. No call. No warning. Just the shuffle of feet in the hallway and 3 soft knocks. I opened it to find her standing there in a too-thin coat, hair frizzing from the drizzle, clutching a reusable shopping bag like it gave her purpose. Can I come in? She asked. I didn't move. She glanced down the hall, then back at me. Please. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in slowly, like the apartment might bite her. Looked around. Took in the secondhand furniture, the chipped paint, the stack of bills by the microwave. You live like this? She muttered, barely above a whisper. I smiled coldly. Yes, and I pay for it myself. She sat on the edge of the couch like it might collapse. I waited. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I miss you. The kids miss you. And your father, he's angry, but he's scared too. Scared of what? I asked. That you'll leave for good, she said. That this is it. I sat across from her, calm, silent. Then she added, and that people are starting to ask questions. There it was. The truth, finally. Not about what she did, but about what she feared. Not losing me. Losing control of the story. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, you came here to fix the optics, not the damage. Her lips parted like she wanted to deny it. But she didn't. Because even she knew, deep down, that I was right. She didn't deny it. But she didn't confirm it either. Instead, Mom shifted tactics like she always did when cornered. You don't understand how hard it was, keeping everything afloat. Your dad's back went out. Chris lost hours at work. The roof needed repairs. You had a business, I interrupted. You had equity. You had options. I had one thing, one account with money I earned. And you dipped into it like it was a family pantry. It was never malicious, she whispered. We always meant to put it back. But you didn't, I said. Her face twisted, not in guilt, but in discomfort, like she couldn't bear the idea of being seen clearly. I stood and walked to the kitchen, poured water into 2 glasses. She followed me with her eyes. Quiet now. I don't need an apology, I said, setting 1 glass in front of her. But I won't accept a rewrite. She took the water but didn't drink. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thin envelope. This, she said softly, is what's left from the consulting account. We dissolved it last week. You can have what's yours. I stared at it. $800. That's all they had left. Out of over $11,000 they took without asking. She pushed it toward me like it was a peace offering. I didn't touch it. It's not about the money anymore, I said. It's about the fact that you thought I wouldn't notice. That I'd be so desperate to stay close, I'd let you steal. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked older, smaller, not out of regret, but because for the first time I wasn't folding. I wasn't the child anymore, and that terrified her more than losing me ever could. She didn't cry. That surprised me. Mom had always been good at tears, the kind that shifted blame without saying a word. But this time there was nothing left to lean on. No shared nostalgia. No deflection. No audience. Just 2 adults in a quiet apartment. One trying to undo something that couldn't be undone. I pushed the envelope back across the table. I don't want your leftovers, I said. I want boundaries. She blinked. What do you mean? I mean, this is how it goes from now on. You don't ask me for money. You don't speak for me to the family. And you don't pretend we're fine in public while avoiding the truth in private. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. She went still. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners. I won't be bringing pies to cover tension. I won't be explaining to aunts and cousins why I'm not married. Not settled. Not whatever version of success makes you look good. If you want a relationship with me, it'll be based on honesty. Not guilt. Not performance. Her fingers curled around the envelope. And if I slip? She asked, voice small. Then I walk, I said. For good this time. We sat in that silence. And for once, I didn't rush to fill it. I let her sit with the version of me she tried to ignore, the one with a spine. Finally, she stood, tucked the envelope back in her bag. And as she turned to leave, she paused by the door and said, You've changed. I nodded. That was the point. She left without another word. And I locked the door behind her, slowly, like closing a chapter I'd been stuck rereading for years. Word got around, faster than I expected. By New Year's, I was getting half-hearted texts from family friends, old neighbors, even Chris's wife Lauren. Just heard. Yikes. Hope things settle down soon. Your mom seems off lately. Are you okay? We never really understood why they had access to your money anyway. Turns out, when you stop playing along, people start noticing how twisted the game was to begin with. Chris didn't reach out. Neither did Dad. But I knew from Amanda that the family group chat, the one I'd been quietly removed from months ago, had shifted tone. The narrative was no longer, I ruined Christmas. It was now, they got caught. And that did something to me I didn't expect. It didn't make me feel vindicated. It made me feel tired. Because even when the truth is clear, some people will always choose comfort over clarity. And in my family, denial was oxygen. Still, the silence felt cleaner now. Honest, at least. I spent January working extra shifts. Signed up for an evening course. Started thinking seriously about moving, really moving out of state. Farther than just 2 towns over. And every time I doubted myself, every time that little voice whispered, "Maybe you overreacted," I'd open that folder, read the dates, the numbers, the voicemail transcript where Mom said, "We only did what we had to." Then I'd remember, I didn't walk away from family. I walked away from people who thought their needs justified my exploitation. Big difference. February came, and with it, quiet. Not the brittle, walking on eggshells quiet I'd grown up with. Not the kind of silence that meant someone was stewing, waiting to explode. Just quiet. No texts. No passive-aggressive memes from Mom. No financial emergencies disguised as check-ins. Just space. And in that space, I started living differently. I rekeyed my locks. Took a short trip to the coast. First solo vacation of my adult life. I bought a second-hand guitar off Facebook Marketplace and started teaching myself chords in the evenings. My apartment still smelled like cheap pine cleaner and reheated takeout. But it was mine. No one rearranged the furniture while I was gone. No one guilt-tripped me for sleeping late. No one asked, "When are you going to settle down?" Like I was a ticking clock instead of a whole person. One afternoon I walked past a couple in a park. Maybe mid-40s, sitting on a bench, just talking. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel like I was behind. I felt ready. Not for someone else. Not yet. But for a life where love wouldn't come with a price tag. Where care didn't mean control. Where family would mean something worth building, not surviving. And I knew then, with absolute clarity, if I ever had kids, I'd teach them that boundaries are not betrayal. That respect isn't something parents are owed for existing. It's something they earn by being decent human beings, not just by signing birth certificates. And I'd teach them something else, too. That the moment someone makes you feel small for protecting yourself, you're already bigger than they ever expected you to be. It's been 6 months now. I haven't spoken to my parents since that day in my apartment. Chris finally reached out last week. Not to apologize, but to ask if I'd consider coming to Dad's birthday dinner. "Just for appearances," he wrote. "Mom misses you." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to answer, but because I knew exactly what not answering would mean. And I didn't owe anyone another performance. I replied, "I hope the dinner goes well. Please don't speak for me again." That was it. Short, clear, final. I didn't attend the dinner. Instead, I took myself out to a quiet rooftop cafe, ordered a drink I couldn't pronounce, and sat under string lights watching strangers laugh at things I didn't need to understand. I felt light. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's shame. Wasn't living under someone else's definition of enough. Wasn't waiting for people to change just so I could feel loved. I created that space for myself. So if you're reading this, wondering if you're crazy for standing your ground, for drawing a line, for not folding just because it's family, let me say this as clearly as I can. You're not crazy. You're healing. And the silence that follows the fallout is not loneliness. It's peace. Hold on to it. You're allowed to be free.